Utah Territory in 1892 was a land of jagged cliffs and unforgiving silence, a place where sound died against canyon walls before it reached another living soul. The cowboy had been riding since dawn, following faint cattle tracks that twisted through the sandstone maze. He wasn't expecting trouble, just a quiet day's work, but trouble sometimes waited in the shadows whether a man invited it or not. When he heard the faint, cracking sound echo through the canyon, he paused. It was too soft to be thunder, too sharp to be wind. Instinct made him turn his horse toward the noise. As he guided his horse deeper, the canyon narrowed, squeezing sunlight into thin, golden ribbons that cut across the dust. He dismounted when he reached a place where the ground had shifted recently fresh debris, scattered stones, a sign that rock had fallen not long ago. His boots crunched softly as he stepped around a bend, and that was when he saw her. An Apache girl, no older than 20, maybe younger, was pinned beneath a slab of broken canyon wall. She lay half-hidden in dust, breathing hard, face streaked with pain and stubborn resolve. She noticed him immediately, dark eyes sharp despite the blood on her leg. The canyon swallowed her voice, but he heard every word. "Make it quick, cowboy." "I won't scream." She said it like a challenge, but there was something else beneath her tone. Exhaustion, maybe fear, maybe acceptance. The cowboy's jaw clenched. He'd heard those words before, from men and women who believed their suffering was inevitable, that mercy meant pain delivered fast. But he wasn't that kind of man, and he wouldn't let her think otherwise. He crouched beside her carefully, mindful not to startle her. Her hands were bloody from trying to free herself, fingernails splintered. Yet she held his gaze fiercely, refusing to show weakness. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, voice staying low, steady, almost gentle. "I'm here to get you out." She blinked, confusion flickering momentarily before suspicion settled back in. She didn't trust him, not yet, but she also didn't have the strength to fight him. The canyon had already stolen too much from her. He examined the rock pinning her leg. It was heavy, but not immovable, shifted just right. He could lift one edge long enough for her to pull free. Still, the wrong move could crush bone or collapse more debris. He carefully brushed dirt away from the trapped limb, trying to see how badly she was hurt. She flinched at his touch but didn't cry out. "Who did this?" he asked quietly. She hesitated before answering, voice barely above a whisper. "The ground broke. I fell. My horse ran." He nodded. It was the truth. Her face didn't hold the shame or anger of someone trying to hide an ambush, just exhaustion. He removed his gloves, pressing his palm to the rock to feel its weight, calculating leverage. She watched him through narrowed eyes, assessing him with the wariness of someone who'd lived too long on the edge of danger. He didn't rush, didn't bark orders, didn't touch her without warning. That alone seemed to unsettle her more than anything. Kindness could be harder to accept than cruelty. When he finally braced himself and prepared to lift, he looked her in the eyes. "When I tell you, you push back with your hands. Don't use the leg." "Not at all." "You understand?" She swallowed and nodded. Sweat trickled down her temple despite the chill in the canyon. He waited until he had the right footing, then pushed upward with every ounce of strength in his back and shoulders. The rock groaned against the earth. She gasped but didn't scream, dragging herself backward through the dust. The moment her legs slid free, he let the rock drop beside him, breath tearing from his lungs. She lay on her back, staring up at the strip of sky above the canyon, chest rising rapidly. Relief loosened her features for the first time, but only briefly. When she tried to sit up, pain shot through her and she bit down hard enough to draw blood. He steadied her without grabbing, just offering support she could reject if she wished. This time, she didn't. He reached for his canteen and held it out. She hesitated before taking it, drinking cautiously, watching him the entire time like she expected betrayal at any second. "You're hurt worse than you're letting on," he observed. She didn't answer, but her silence was agreement. The cut along her leg was deep, jagged, and still bleeding. Without treatment, infection would claim her faster than the rock ever could. "I need to bandage that," he said. She stiffened instantly. "No," but her voice trembled. She didn't want his help, but she needed it. He removed his neckerchief slowly, giving her time to refuse again. When she didn't, he tore it into strips and cleaned the wound as gently as he could. She gripped his jacket sleeve, not in fear but to stop herself from trembling. He worked quietly, respectfully, never glancing anywhere except the injury. Trust didn't bloom instantly, but its first fragile roots took hold in that silence, in that careful gentleness. When he tied the final knot, she finally exhaled, shoulders loosening. Once the worst was handled, she tried to stand. Her leg buckled immediately. He caught her before she hit the ground. Again, she didn't resist. Shockingly, she even leaned into him for a breath, too weak to pretend anymore. "You can't walk," he murmured. "I'll carry you?" She opened her mouth to argue but closed it when she realized her body wouldn't obey her pride. He lifted her carefully, mindful of her injury. She weighed almost nothing, yet he felt the strength in her even now. In the way she held herself despite the pain, the canyon stretched ahead in winding, treacherous turns, but he carried her without complaint, adjusting his hold whenever she winced. She rested her head against his shoulder, fighting sleep. "Why help me?" she whispered once. He didn't answer right away. The wind moved around them, brushing the walls like old spirits passing through. Finally, he said, "Because someone should." She closed her eyes. For the first time since he found her, her breathing softened. When they finally reached his horse, he set her down gently against the saddle, keeping her steady. Her fingers curled weakly into his coat, not wanting to fall, maybe not wanting to be left. "I'm not leaving you," he promised. Those words made her flinch, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar weight of safety. He mounted first, then lifted her into his arms again, settling her in front of him, her back against his chest. She didn't resist. Couldn't. The canyon wind was cold, but his warmth steadied her as he guided the horse out of the ravine. The setting sun painted the rocks in burning red light, casting long shadows behind them. Her body relaxed fully for the first time, exhaustion finally claiming her. Before sleep took her, she whispered, barely audible, "I didn't scream." He smiled faintly. "I noticed." Then she drifted into unconsciousness. Finally safe because someone refused to make it quick. The moment the cowboy braced his shoulder under the canyon rock, the world around them grew painfully silent. The girl's breath came in thin, controlled bursts, as though she had trained herself never to show fear, not even now, when she was trapped, wounded, and alone with a man she had every reason to distrust. He could feel her watching him, measuring every move, judging whether he meant her harm or salvation. The rock shifted slightly, grinding against the canyon floor. Dust rained down over his hat, but he didn't stop. "Stay with me," he muttered. "We're getting you out." With each inch he carved between the stone and her fragile body, she clenched her fists tighter. Her people taught strength through silence, but this silence felt different, forced, brittle. He saw the strain in her jaw, saw how her fingers dug into the sand until they bled. "If this hurts, tell me," he said. She only shook her head. She had told him earlier she wouldn't scream, as if she expected cruelty. But he wasn't a man who took pride in another's pain. Carefully, inch by inch, he shifted the weight until her trapped leg finally slid free. She collapsed forward, landing against his chest before she realized what she was doing. For the first time, she didn't push him away. Her breath trembled against his shirt, warm and rapid. He didn't touch her, didn't dare, not until she lifted her hand weakly and caught his sleeve. "Don't move yet," she whispered, the words sounding strange, as if she wasn't used to asking for gentleness. He nodded silently, letting her lean as long as she needed. His heart beat steady and unhurried beneath her cheek. When she finally pulled back, he saw the deep gash along her thigh, swollen and darkened by dust and pressure. She tried to stand on her own, stubborn pride guiding her movements, but the instant she put weight on her leg, pain shot through her like lightning. She gasped, gripping the canyon wall to keep from falling. Before she could collapse again, he caught her arm. "Easy," he murmured. "Let me help." She hesitated, torn between instinct and necessity, then gave a single reluctant nod. He lifted her gently, cradling her weight as if she were something fragile the desert had forgotten to protect. The path out of the canyon was steep and narrow. and the wind pushed hot air through the ravine like a bellows. She clung to him tighter than she meant to, fingers curling into his shirt whenever her leg throbbed. He never rushed, never complained. He kept his steps slow, steady, careful, as though carrying her was not a burden but a responsibility he had chosen long before he found her trapped beneath stone. When they reached a shaded ledge halfway up, he paused to rest her against the rock. She watched him tear part of his own shirt to wrap around her wound. Her eyes softened in a way he wasn't prepared for. "You're not like the others," she whispered. He tied the cloth firmly but gently. "I'm not here to take anything from you," he said, "not even a thank you." She blinked, startled by the sincerity in his voice. Among her people, trust was earned through actions, not promises. And this cowboy, this stranger, had lifted a stone that could have crushed both of them if he had misjudged its weight. He had risked his body for hers. That meant something more than she wanted it to. When he lifted her again, she didn't resist. She rested her arm around his shoulders, her head against him, letting him guide her up the canyon trail. The desert wind brushed against them with dry heat, carrying distant echoes of her tribe's drums from somewhere far beyond the ridges. He wondered if someone would come looking for her. She wondered if he would be gone long before they arrived. For reasons she couldn't explain, the second possibility hurt her more. By the time they reached the rim, the sun had begun to soften toward evening. He set her down near a cluster of scrub trees, the only patch of shade for miles. "I'll build a fire," he said. "Night gets cold out here?" She watched him gather branches, surprised by the gentleness in every motion, the way he kept glancing toward her, not out of doubt, but out of quiet concern. When he returned, she spoke softly. "Most men would have left me." He stopped, expression unreadable. "Most men ain't me." The fire crackled and the canyon winds settled into a slow, haunting hum. She reached for his hand without thinking, fingertips brushing his knuckles. He didn't pull away. Her voice was barely audible. "You didn't make it quick," she said, echoing the first words she'd spoken to him. He looked at her, studying her face in the flickering firelight. "No," he answered quietly, "I made it right." Something inside her broke, then not in pain, but in release. The final layer of fear she carried melted into something softer, something dangerously close to trust. She shifted, leaning into him again, but this time it wasn't from weakness. It was choice. He adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, keeping his movements slow and respectful. She rested her head against him, closing her eyes as the fire warmed her skin. "You saved me," she whispered. "And not because you wanted anything in return." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. She felt his silence, steady and honest, like a promise he wasn't ready to speak aloud. When dawn finally touched the canyon with pale gold, her people arrived, warriors on horseback, arrows drawn, eyes sharp with suspicion. She stood with difficulty, leaning on the cowboy's arm. "He saved me," she said clearly, meeting their gaze without shame. They studied him, then her, then the bandaged wound on her leg. Slowly, they lowered their bows. Her father nodded once, a gesture of respect few outsiders had ever earned. The cowboy prepared to step back, to return to his own world, but she gripped his hand, refusing to let go. The desert, the canyon, the night spent in fragile trust, none of it was something she meant to forget. And neither he realized, did he? Together, they walked toward her people, her hand still in his, creating a story that would be whispered for generations.